Right, so we start with trainer David Dennis, who is alongside me, a man who handed in his licence over 18 months ago now, but taken it back out not too long ago. And here, I suppose, to tell me why. But first of all, David, welcome along. We were looking back at that shot of you walking up the gallops, and I said, when was that? And you were a year out, so it's 2015, you said 14. You haven't aged a bit. You haven't changed.
No, thank you. I feel as though I have.
Yes. Well, after the 2 years you've had, I can understand why you'd say you thought you might have aged a bit. Just take me through it then. Almost go back 2 years to the day if you can. So we're going into a winter and a new season for you. Was it at the forefront of your mind that it could be your last season training?
Yes and no. I mean, I was faced with a situation. I was very lucky. I got set up by my ex-wife's in-laws at a yard near Hennessy in Worcestershire. I trained there for 7 seasons, and during that period I trained over 150 odd winners, and unfortunately the yard was a big yard. It was 60 stables. I always had roughly around about 30 horses. We did get up to 40 one year, and I just knew I was always going to struggle financially. It wasn't viable to stay there. I tried to find the right size yard to move to and stay local within the sort of the county. And I struggled to find somewhere. That was the hardest part. So I approached Tom Simmons and sort of told him my situation, and he had room to accommodate horses that I used to train. Went to him. It was May the 1st, 2020, and was with him for a period as his assistant.
So that obviously encompasses the pandemic and that time. So it wasn't a case of no racing, global pandemic. You're going to hand in your licence. That was already going to happen. Just the fact that we stopped racing meant it brought it forward.
Yeah. Basically, I think the last race meeting I had a runner at was at Taunton in March, which was actually a winner. But I was going to relinquish my licence in May that year anyway.
And it was really personal circumstances that brought that round. You say you're now ex-wife, so because of what was going on personally, it meant that you couldn't stay in the yard you were in, and you hadn't had a chance to find anywhere else, so that you had no option. Yeah,
basically. Yeah, I mean it was disappointing and frustrating because I sort of had an amount of horses that I knew I could keep a business, but it was never viable where I was. So yeah, I went, like I said, I went to Tom Simmons as his assistant, and it all went very well. And then the turn of the new year, this year, I sort of made my mind up. I thought I was ready to, reapply for my licence again. Trying to find the right size yard was always never. That doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately. They're very, yards with facilities that are licensed and somewhere to live, in a certain area around the Midlands are few and far between. So I went to Matt Shepherd very calmly accommodated me, and I took a number of horses with me again. All my owners that came with me were very understanding. It wasn't ideal doing that in the middle of the season. It was probably a bit of a brave move, but I'd made my mind up. And now I've reapplied for my licence in the summer and had my first runners in August.
Just to take you back to the time with Tom then, you obviously are a trainer that's been training for some time. You then go back to work as an assistant. Officially, you take your own horses there as well, and I'm sure in the main are looking after those. What was that dynamic like? Was that how difficult was it in some ways for it not to be your name on the licence?
It didn't really bother me at the time. A few of my owners were sort of thinking, I went there on the understanding we would potentially look at a training partnership because the BHA had brought that incentive in, but that was never going to be straightforward. So yes, it was a different dynamic, but I enjoyed my time there, and the horses ran fantastically. I think we had probably the highest strike rate in the country for a while. And I look back at it and think, well, it was the right thing to do from my personal point of view. And
so it wasn't as if it didn't. It's not like it didn't work out. It came to its natural conclusion at the start of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said at the start of this year, I'd sort of made my mind up that I need to get my own licence back, and and going to Matt Shepherd's. He was very helpful and understood my situation, and I was never going to stay there.
Was there ever a possibility of a dual licence there, or was that ever considered?
No, I sort of made my mind that I needed to do, what I needed to do on my own 2 feet again. And yeah, it did. Matt's got a fantastic yard, but it didn't really have scope to expand. And it had limited facilities, which, it didn't stop the horses winning. So, I look back at that time there and things went very well again.
Would you ever consider a joint licence with someone going forward? And what would you say are the potential, obviously we're seeing it more and more, certainly on the flat, a little bit of it over jumps. What would you say are the potential advantages for, say, trainers with a size operation such as yourselves, or even bigger?
Yeah, I think they are a good idea. I think a lot of them are obviously family connections, or father and son, Thady and John Gosden, for example. I think it's a good idea because it can be a slow progression for a son to take over, for example, or husband and wife, and it's very much a team thing. Racing yards are a team. The word team is key. So I think, yeah, I would potentially look at it again, but I sort of made my mind up at the turn of the year. I had to get on with it again, and that's what I've done. How
did it come about then? How did you find the right yard to go and retake out the licence?
So I'm now at Edgecote, which is an estate-owned premises. So I'd heard that there potentially could be a barn there, and when I went there in May and had a look at it, I saw the facilities and thought it was pretty much a pay-as-you-go basis. You pay for the gallops each week, per horse per week, and I'm paying for a barn. It's 16 stables. I know exactly to the penny how much it costs, and I'm comfortable with that. I've got enough horses and enough very loyal owners who've come with me that I know where I stand. Whereas the previous yard I was in, I just always knew it was always going to be an uphill climb. In fact, impossible. That I look back at it in fond memories. I had some great winners from there, and it was a great time of my life. But
now you can see a viable future for you going forward, and I suppose with the hope to grow. Is that what you? So how many horses have you got at the moment?
Around about 16. A lot of them are young horses. I'm almost having to reset. I've got some lovely 3-year-olds. They need a bit of time, but the horses that I've had, Cyclop, for example, he's 10, Innisfree Lad's 9. Horses like that, they're only got a certain shelf life, and you have to look to the future. And I've bought some nice young horses again this year, and hopefully they'll come into fruition in the next couple of seasons.
How has buying horses been?
Tough. It's remarkable, really, considering the times we're in, or have been in, how strong the trade is. And we mentioned earlier, horses in training trade this week is as strong as ever. It's remarkable.
Well, would that not? That's not something you expected necessarily, given what the country has had to take in over the last couple of years. But as far as you walking around the sales rooms goes, not a lot would appear to have changed.
No, I think the average at the Derby sale was 55,000 euros for 3-year-olds unbroken. That's a lot of money, which is good for the trade, but it is remarkable how strong the trade, especially horses in training as well.
And can someone like yourself compete at those sort of prices?
It is tough. There's budgets for all owners, but it is tough to compete with the big spending owners. Yeah.
Sum up the last couple of years, if you can. I mean, how much of a journey have you been on, both racing world-wise, personal life-wise, and where do you feel now at the back of it?
I feel I'm happy, as in I've got my own licence again. I'm my own boss again. I feel I was in a situation 18 months ago that it was just the way the cards fell. But that's part of life. It's a tough business, and I look back and think, well, I couldn't do anything else bar try, and that's what I'm still doing. And I hope, I've had some very loyal owners, and I hope I can repay them by the horses running well, and I hope we get good results.
Is it tougher now than when you first took out the licence?
Yes, I think it is. I think it's tougher because there's a lot of big, powerful yards out there. you know, you're competing with yards that have got 120 horses, and if you've got a dozen that are running, if your one hope goes wrong, or if, you know, it's unfortunately training racehorses is a numbers game. If I've got 16 horses, not all those are going to run. You know, there's a certain amount that will go wrong, or certainly get issues. You know, you get problems along the way. It's a tough business, but I knew that before I started.
And was there ever a point in the last 18 months where you thought, I might not come back, I might not take up my licence again, or did you always know you would?
No, I sort of, I'm not hell bent on. I love training racehorses. Don't get me wrong, but I don't love putting a financial noose around my neck and feeling it tighten, which was the situation I was in. Horse racing, I've been involved in horse racing all my life. I love training horses, being with horses, but you have to look at it realistically. And I'm not a mathematician, but when I looked at the figures where I was, they were never going to add up.
That was because of the situation you were in with the old yard, but as you said, you can make it work now.
I can make it work now because I know exactly how much it's costing me to stay where I am with the numbers I've got.
And with that, is it head above water? Is it only just about head above water, or is it comfortable?
Yeah, comfortable. Okay. Comfortable. I mean, sometimes you get good years, you get bad years. You're only as good as your last winner, as we know. It's a competitive sport, but you've also got it is a business as well. You say you've been in racing your whole life. Was there only ever one route you were going to go down? When I went to Whitney College, I went to Whitney College for 2 years when I was 16. I went in there with an open mind that I love horse racing. I came out of there and I wasn't hell-bent on being a jockey. It was the way it worked out, and I very much look back at that with fond memories. And it was a natural progression when I finished race riding to go training racehorses.
Was your dad very pro you being a jockey?
Yeah, I think so. I think
as far as you know.
Yeah, as far as I know.
But but it doesn't always work out like that, does it? Even now we'll go and speak to some trainers whose children are going down that route, and some are all for it, and some think.
Yeah, well,
I wish they wouldn't.
I know. I've got a 13-year-old daughter who's very keen and loves her hunting and rides very well. And I expect the question's going to be asked to be, And
what would the answer be?
Well, I think as long as she's keen, you got to want to do it. If you're going in there and thinking, I'm not sure, I think that's the key. If you want to do it, if you want to do something, you got a good chance of succeeding.
Would a 13-year-old daughter now, would you be more pro her getting involved and being a jockey than going back to when you were 13, if you see what I mean? Do you see there's more possibilities and more opportunity for a young girl now going into the industry?
Oh, without a doubt, yeah, without a doubt. Pony racing is a great incentive, for example. There's so many courses at the racing school, which is fantastic. I went to the racing school as an amateur, which, I could ride, but when I actually had, a bit of tuition, the likes of Yogi Breisner, it just takes you to the next level and it opens your eyes up. It's no good going into it thinking you can ride. Well, actually, you analyse these things and get taught it properly. Yes, definitely for girls, yeah, without a doubt.
And for you, how easy a decision was it to stop riding and go into training? Did you go straight from one to the other?
No, I ran a pre-training yard for Favourites Racing, who were my in-laws at the time, and I ran a couple of youngsters in point-to-points, and they went very well, and enjoyed that. I enjoyed that for that. That was about 2 years I did that, and then I did my trainer's course, and it was sort of go on from there, really.
And I suppose that's a route. I mean, quite a few people don't go down that route. If you're running a pre-training yard and it's going pretty well, I suppose the hunger is there to say, right, I want to be a trainer in my own right.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have done it, being honest, without the financial support of my in-laws. And I definitely wouldn't advise anybody trying it on their own steam, because the investment needed for all the gallops and stabling and facilities, it's a lot of money to put down, and for very little return, just trying to keep the business afloat, basically.
So What do you think is the key to being a success? Go back to when you started a successful young trader. You say you couldn't have done it without that financial support.
Yeah.
So do you need to be wealthy or have some wealth behind you to do it, or it's simply not going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. I earned a good living from race riding, but it would never be enough to invest in a property to, I mean, you could throw 100,000 at an all-weather gallop if it's a decent all-weather gallop, and basically that is all right. It's invested in the property, but you need, you're never going to get that money back. It's in the ground, and that's the same with buildings. Stabling is different, slightly different, but that investment is a lot of capital to be investing in a property. And like I said, I earned a good living race riding, but putting it down on a property to do that would be the brave man's route.
If somebody's going to invest in you, you need their backing for a while, right? It's not a short-term proposition. You need somebody who is going to stick by you. And thankfully, you had that for the amount of time that you needed, and now you're in a different position.
I am.
But you were afforded that by what happened in the first 6 or 7 years.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's there are people who have invested in there's trainers in Lambourne who are doing a similar thing. They're paying for the gallops as they go, and once they get established, they go from there. So it is doable, but I would be concerned if I tried to do it on my own steam.
Can we go back to Coombe Hill and the Hennessy? How old were you?
17.
Okay. I want to know if there's sometimes when we look at these, are there sort of walk back shot? Were you walking back in with the horse or anything like that?
I led him up. Yes. I just got my driving licence in August, and this was in November. So I was at Whitney College at the time. It was a great day for us as a family, and met Dad there. And I think he'd stayed up the night before, and led him up for him, and there was a big party afterwards.
You were stuffed, weren't you? There was absolutely no way you weren't going to go on and train racehorses after leading this thing out. You may have been at Whitney College, but what else are you going to do after a buzz like this?
Yeah, well, this is actually before I got my amateur license. Well, I was amateur at the time. My brother used to ride him, and then I worked for Ian Williams as his stable jockey for a couple of seasons, and that was a while ago.
Yeah, Man in the Saddle's done all right.
Yes, yeah, James is doing well.
Wait, so this is the back of you?
Yes, with the cap on, yeah.
Great stuff. That must have been an incredible buzz.
Oh, it was incredible, and I think the most interesting part was, the press loved the story. We had loads of the press used to ring and want to interview Dad. And Dad, he said at the time,
Tell us the story.
So, the story about Coombe Hill. Yeah, so Dad bought him he'd seen him running a point-to-point in Ireland while he was over there judging at a show. And he went and we tried to ride him, but I don't think he had any shoes on or something like that. That was the story at the time. So he bought him as a 4-year-old. He'd had one run, and when he came over, I remember seeing him in the stable, and he looks not shocking. That's a bit extreme, but he looked so poor. And I just thought, it was a bit of this nice horse is coming from Ireland. So I looked at it and thought, well, that was a bit disappointing. Anyway, within 2 or 3 months, Dad had fed him up well, and got him going, and was very happy with him. And we ran him in a point-to-point down at a point-to-point track called Great Thew near Liskeard, and he was absolutely bottomless. Even the open horses that day were trotting over the line, and we were all like, are we sure we want to be running this, nice 5-year-old from Ireland in a maiden point-to-point? So anyway, my brother rode him, and he goes around this point-to-point track at Great Thew, and it just literally jumped from fence to fence. It was not a pulling. It wasn't a keen horse. But it literally went around with his ears pricked, jumped from fence to fence, came down to the last, pinged out over it, and steamed to the line. So we all sort of stood there and thought, right, okay, this could be okay. So then Dad kept him point-to-point, and I think he won his 3 that year, and then he won another 3 the next year, and then he stepped him up to Hunter Chases. And then he ran an amateur race that season, which was '96. He ran an amateur handicap chase at Cheltenham, and my brother rode him, and again went round with his ears pricked. You know, an ex-pointer jumping round Cheltenham, he sauntered round. So then he ran him in the Badger Beer at Cheltenham, at Wincanton, which is next Saturday actually, and Jimmy Frost rode him, and he won very well. So he was entered in the Hennessy, and he was off 10 stone, and Jamie Osborne, I think, I'd seen him run, and I think Jimmy Frost was injured at the time, which was a shame for him. But I don't think he would have done 10 stone anyway. So Jamie Osborne had seen him run in the amateur race and the Badger B, and I think he finished second to him on a horse called Glamott for Kim Bailey. Anyway, he bounced out, and because he had such a lightweight, he pinged him out and jumped from fence to fence, and as we just saw, quickened up nicely.
That was it.
Yeah.
Could you do? We've got Tom Ellis coming in later on. Could you do that nowadays? Do you think? Could you go down that route with a horse, or is it just not possible?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, there's plenty of horses running in point of points and going under rules.
But to get to get to the level that
I think the problem is people probably haven't got the patience, and bringing them up from point of points and then into a novice hunter chase, and then handicap chasing. It's a tougher thing to do. You still can do it. I think people, if they've won a point of point now, they tend to we'll get them under rules, you know.
And how in that time we've seen a big shift with the Irish point to point game, which has just gone from strength to strength. Young horses then turning into the future of the rules game.
Yeah.
Things over here haven't moved on anything like that.
There's an issue of the Irish point to point circuit is funded fairly heavily by the Irish government, which is fantastic for them. So I think we are getting there in England. I think the TBA have set up some maiden races for young mares and fillies, which is great. We're on catch up basically, but we are getting there. There's a lot of decent English pointer pointers that go on to run very well in handicaps and graded races in England. So yes. But back in the time, I mean, Teton Mill was another example. He did a similar thing to what Coombe did. He won the Hennessy, the King George, so on and so forth. But I think I cut my teeth riding point of points. I think point of pointing, it is amateur, but it's getting a bit more like Ireland. It's, there are yards who are targeting races to sell horses, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's what Tom and Gina Ellis have sort of set their stall out going forward to try and do that as much as possible. I feel like we can't have more than 2 people in, unfortunately, but I feel like that would have made sense. So there you go. Right, you've got a couple today, haven't you, at Lingfield? Chances?
Yeah, I've got Just Toby, who's owned by Lorna Hardwick. He's only a big baby, really. He will go. He's the sort of horse who could have gone in a point as a young horse, but he's a bit of a project, but he could run well. Hopefully he'll have an each way chance. We've got Broken Quest in the novice handicap chase. He's having his last run in a novice handicap chase because he won his novice chase at Ludlow on the 4th of March, and he can't run in a novice after today. So I've tried to utilise the fact that he's a novice.
You've got a plan.
Yeah,
I see.
Something like that.
I gotcha. Great stuff. In fact, good luck for the season ahead and having a full crack back with a licence at the season. Thanks for your time. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
David Dennis, thank you very much indeed.